for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. Man, you know what? I always do my Tuesday night show over on Right America Media with Skipper for Veteran Nation, and I have to adjust my camera for that, and then I go and do another show and I forget. So you guys are going to have to, bear with me here for a minute, because as I was telling my guest tonight, Rebecca, this is a very professional operation. We are, ladies and gentlemen, we are tip-top performance here. No one, hands down, can beat the level of professionalism that I and my crew bring to the video and podcasting game. And if you don't believe me, you should go back and listen to Muddied Waters Media most recent show with Spike and Matt. They took a long time off, and they completely forgot what they were even supposed to say in the introduction of their show. And that never happens here, ever. So, yeah, I'm calling you guys out because it's Matt. Matt's just getting married. I think it's this weekend. And congratulations to Matt and his beloved and everyone who's able to take part in that. They stroked Jason Lyon's ego on the beginning of their show, too, as well, and said that everyone should thank God for Jason. And in the history of podcasting, no one has ever thanked God for Jason Lyon. So, yeah. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, check out the merchandise. Check out the coffee. I'm ready to place another order from the people who make my coffee blend for me. And I'd like to sell some more merchandise, especially here in the great frozen west, the great frozen north of Minnesota, because it's that time of year, and I'm still sitting here with a drink with ice in it. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to bring in here in just a minute Rebecca Whiting. She is running for school board, and she's a homeschooling mom. And a lot of people would say, why in the world would you want to bring in a homeschooling mom and have them be on the school board when they have chosen to put their kids in their own home for education? And I think it's a valid question. I know what my answer would be to that, but we'll find out what Rebecca's answer is to that. But Rebecca is doing what I have been trying to get people to do for for quite a while, really, but especially since the inception of this channel, of the show. I have been telling people, get involved at the most local level, because that's where it matters. We get people freaking out. We got to get the right president in. We got to get the right person in the Senate at the federal level. We got to get the right person in the House at the federal level. And my answer to that has really been, from the outset, has been local nullification. Like, I don't care who the president is. I don't care who your senator in the U.S. House is, or in the U.S. Senate is. I don't care who your representative to the U.S. House of Representatives is. What I care about is whether or not you have the right people at the local level making the right decisions, doing the right things, who are willing to stand up to these higher authorities and challenge them and basically thumb their nose at them and say, we don't care what you say. We're going to do what we want to do because, gosh darn it, we need to decentralize the power base. And as many of you know, I'm not libertarian. I'm not a big L libertarian. I'm not in the Libertarian Party. I haven't paid my dues to the Libertarian Party. And, if Charlie and the folks at the Minnesota Libertarian Party are smart, they wouldn't let me in anyway. But I'm damn sure not a Republican anymore. And that's the other reason why I'm going to bring Rebecca in here in just a second, is that Rebecca has run afoul of the Republican war machine. And as some of you know, especially since I have enough already by Scott Horton sitting up here, I am an anti-interventionist. I am anti-war. And if you watched my conversation with Scott Horton here just a couple of weeks ago, you can understand why I'm anti-war, why I'm anti-interventionist. But I'm also anti-political war in the sense that the uniparty, in all of its facets, at the federal level and the state level and even at the local level, hates outsiders. They hate people in their own party. Look at the history of the last several months, the last year and a half here, especially in the state of Minnesota, and you will see that the Minnesota GOP, we know how bad the DFL is. But we used to kind of have this mainstay of the GOP. We could trust the Republicans, even if they weren't quite as where we wanted them to be on issues of liberty and conservatism. We could trust them to some degree. And that has been, and I've been warning people about this, has been proven to be a falsehood as well. They hate the outsiders, and they hate the outsiders in their own party. They hate the Mark Bishofskis. They literally are campaigning against him. They're campaigning against the Eric Mortensons. They're going after anybody who doesn't toe the party line. And if you're a third party or an independent in the state of Minnesota, it doesn't matter what office you're running for, school board, dog catcher, um, trash collection bureau board, it doesn't matter. The Minnesota GOP will slander you. They will libel you. They will attack you. They will do everything in their power to make you look like you are some sort of radical that is either a Nazi or a pot smoking leftist who doesn't have the brain cells to rub together to do anything other than run on the legalized marijuana now ticket. No offense to my buddy Bull. Um, but that's how they paint you. That's absolutely what they do, and they have done it over and over and over again. They've done it to Nathan Wiesenberg. They've done it to Nathan Miller. They've gone after Ashley Klingbeil. They've gone after dozens of people in the state of Minnesota, and that's the Republicans, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm gonna do a show where I'm gonna talk about this. We're not gonna call them rhinos anymore. I'm sick of hearing rhinos. Rhino is a descriptor of a person who is in the Republican Party, but doesn't actually vote Republican. The problem is in Minnesota, the people in leadership aren't rhinos. They are the Republican Party. They represent the Republican Party. And like I said, we know what we get from the DFL. But there are no rhinos anymore in Minnesota. If you're in the Republican Party, and this is no offense to my friends that are genuine conservatives, genuine liberty-minded people in the Minnesota Republican Party, your time in that party has got to be limited, because you are actually, if you're the conservative, if you're the paleo conservative, if you're the traditional conservative, if you're the liberty-minded constitutional originalist in the Republican Party right now, you're the rhino. And if that hurts, I don't care. I'm going to say it one more time. If you're the conservative, if you're the paleocon, tradcon, constitutional originalist, liberty defending person in the Republican Party in Minnesota, you are the rhino now. Because the Republican Party of Minnesota has become the party of moderate leftism, moderate progressive left. That is the Republican Party of Minnesota. And we're going to bring Rebecca in now to tell her story of just in her little area, in her quiet little rural agrarian neck of Minnesota, how much she has run afoul of the Republican Party and her motivation as a homeschooling mom to run for school board. So, I hyped you up a lot, so you're going to have to come in here and shine. You're going to have to blow, you're gonna have to blow Spike Cohen out of the water. He was the very first person in the Libertarian Lowdown series. So like here it is. You can end Spike's career by blowing him out of the water today. No pressure though. No pressure, Rebecca.
I'll see what I can do.
So thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bull made me aware of what was going on with you, and he said, "Have you heard Rebecca's story?" And then next thing I know, he's tagging me on your posts, and I'm like, I feel obligated to talk to her now, and now I got to harass her, see if she'll come on. So tell us a little bit about, for those people that are tuning in the Facebook world, and they're going to watch this later on YouTube. Tell us a little bit about, where you're coming from philosophically, socioculturally, sociopolitically, and then we'll get into some of the other stuff.
Really, politically, I came to the Libertarian Party accidentally, I guess. I had already had kind of these, I don't know, my philosophy had evolved in that direction, and then more or less found a place where, people thought like me there, but I had already moved in that direction on my own. And that a lot of that, really everything that for me in my adult life all stems from my experiences in the Army and being deployed during a time when, 9/11, I joined a year before 9/11 happened. And then 9/11 happened, and then the Iraq War happened immediately after that. And so the time I was in just really got wrapped up in like those big events. And so I was a medic while I was in. So medics are not people who do nothing. We see like the worst of everything.
I like how you said, we're not the people that don't do anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What's that even?
Well, that's always like kind of the joke. Like, people are in the military are all like, oh, what are the medics doing? They're kind of, not doing anything. It was like, yeah, but you don't understand. Like if the medics are doing stuff, that means things are going really, really wrong. So you don't want the medics to be busy. But I was deployed to Iraq from 04 to 05, and then again from 06 to 07. And in the Al Anbar province, my first deployment, and then in Baghdad, my second deployment during the surge. The surge started while we were there. So, very busy time periods. A lot of, things happened. My brigade, while we were in Ramadi, took the highest casualty rate for the entire war in all theaters, both Afghanistan and Iraq. While
Who were
we were
you
there.
over there with?
And second ID. So we were actually stationed in Korea, and the Army had this great idea of deploying a unit from Korea to Iraq, and then instead of going back to Korea after our deployment, the entire brigade was ETS'd to Fort Carson, Colorado. So, but it was second brigade, 2ID. And then, but as a medic, I was with a support battalion, and we were kind of tasked out to other battalions depending on what their mission was for that day. And so I saw everything that, on the ground as it was happening. Medics were not just like, we didn't just do the aid station on our base, but we were also out in the city with the companies. And so we were.
Were you a platoon level medic then, or?
So my second deployment, yes, there was. I was with a security platoon, my second deployment, and then we did QRF, which is a quick reactionary force. And so anytime something like happened out in the city, firefight, casualties, whatever, we were, already geared up because we just took rotation on it to just immediately be able to go out into the city and, give them whatever support they needed, whether that was recovery or returning fire or, whatever it was. So But those experiences in Iraq, I came home very different, I guess, like just seeing like American foreign policy on the ground and in first person, and then came home. And of course, then, we know now, like, through history, just because we can see in hindsight that ISIS came in 2014 and took back cities like Ramadi, where, like I said, we lost so many people just maintaining that city in 04 and 05. And so like when ISIS took the city, having to really come to terms with like, why were we there? What was the point? What did they die for? And having to really, like, that was something I almost didn't come out of because it was just an intensity going through it the first time, but then the second time having to like, figure out the rationale behind it. And really at that point I came to terms with, I kind of had an idea before, but you don't really want to believe that you've been used. You kind of want to believe that you're the good guy. And so after 2014, I was just like, we were the insurgents. Like they were, we called them the insurgents, but we were the insurgents. And and so that just kind of started this like ball rolling of really not trusting anything the United States government, like the propaganda and what they said and what they did, and not believing that for the face value anymore. And then just kind of going from there. So, but that's where it started.
You ended up taking a pretty severe injury while you were there. Are you comfortable talking about that, or?
Yeah, it wasn't like
because it's pertinent to the story.
Yeah, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was severe. It was just because in the beginning of the war, IEDs were used as a way for the Iraqis or whoever was fighting in Iraq against us. IEDs were placed on the side of the road. They could be buried. They could just be like hidden in garbage. In Baghdad, they kind of had evolved into what we call an EFP, which is a lot different than just a normal IED. But an IED could just be, a tin can full of explosives and shrapnel. And then somebody has a way of being able to basically light the fuse, whether it was through infrared or like a cell phone or something. And so what they did was when we went out the gate for missions, they knew that eventually we were going to have to come back. And, there was only certain roads in and out of the gates of our base. There wasn't that many options, and it's because it's all in city. Like, you're basically like buildings on every side. And then, it's just a road. You have to follow the road. And so what happened was we had done a weapons cache sweep that morning, and we're coming back, and the roads were just lined with kids. It was all kids. And I remember thinking, because this was at the very beginning, this was in November of 04, and we had gotten there in September. And I was like, oh, kids, I love kids. So I was like, oh, kids. And I was just starting to like wave to one when the blast happened. And I had just locked eyes with a little girl. And everything was just, I don't really remember immediately afterwards what happened, because by the time I came to, we were back on our base or going through the gate or something. There was some time period where I was kind of out. And the first sergeant that was with me in the back of our vehicle was grabbing me by my flak vest, shaking me because he had actually landed on top of me. We'd both been hit. But so from that was a traumatic brain injury, which is back then they weren't really talking about it. Nobody even I wasn't bleeding or anything like that. I was just knocked unconscious from the blast. But nobody even, I went to the aid station. They were like, yep, you're not dead, and just kept doing what we were doing. And it wasn't until we got back to the States 10 months later that somebody was like, hey, this happened to you, we need to track this. That was actually significant, but, I mean, I
think
was seeing people
there's a
daily that had like major injuries, so
there's a disconnect, I think, too. So like you talk, even now the military in you comes out as well. What happened to me wasn't that bad, comparatively. Like I didn't like nobody like blew my legs off, right? And like I didn't
well,
lose
yeah,
an
that's actually
eye.
what I was just thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. No, like right. Like I didn't lose an eye. I couldn't. But
Medics are
and
known for their strange sense of humor too, so there's that.
oh, it's not just you, sweetheart. it's 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 all of us. I mean, I was with the 82nd, and I was fortunate enough to not serve, in a time of, well, I won't say I didn't serve in a time of war because um, we haven't known a time in the United States since the end of World War One where we haven't been in a state of war. Um, but
That's
you
true.
know, I was fortunate enough to not. I had a lackluster, very short career in the military. I am the definition of lackluster, and lackluster military career. And then there's a picture of me, and them kicking me in the ass as I was leaving the military, and that was active duty.
Before 2001, you could get away with that.
Yeah. Now you could be lackluster, and they don't care. They just need bodies. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that's true.
but I do think there is a reality in which we have a tendency to either do one of two things, and there's very rarely is there a middle ground. Either everything that happened to me is the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody in the entirety of the world, or what happened to me is really not all that bad compared to like, and other people are looking at that going, "You survived that?" Like, and and you're like, "Yeah, why? It's not a big deal." And so I've had to I had close calls. Like if you're familiar with the Green Ramp disaster at Fort Bragg and Pope Air Force Base, from the early '90s, narrowly missed being there that day,
Okay.
and I still think about that to this day. And I missed being there, but it still weighs on me.
Hmm.
And there's 27 paratroopers killed in just a stupid error, waiting to load onto planes for a training
Yeah.
mission. And I
Right.
and I narrowly missed that. And I was severely assaulted in the line of duty as a deputy several years ago. And and I go, well, nobody tried to shoot me, nobody stabbed me, and other people are like, what happened? What happened to you? And I tell them, and they're like, you lived through that, or you survived that, or you get the why would that bother you? That's like, so you got in a fight, that's. And so we have this tendency to either way overblow what happens to us or way underplay what happens to us, without often understanding how much that can impact you on a psychological level and an emotional level. And I don't want to. I'll let you determine how you want to talk about what happened to you, as far as once they look at you and go, yeah, we kind of need to track what happened to you. This is a big deal. What did they end up saying diagnosis wise once you got stateside and they said, we got to track this?
Well, it was basically like part of SRP. So when you get back to the States, you go through this whole process of checking your medical records and going through all these classes. And so I'd be on the list for like burn pits because there was burn pit exposure. And then just none of us really understood, I don't think at that point, like what the significance was of what our brigade had gone through while we were there, because we were just trying to make it through the days. There wasn't, I mean, we were like essentially in survival mode for that entire year. Like the casualties started right after we got there, and they didn't stop until the day we left. And so going through SRP, and
You're gonna
being
you're gonna
diagnosed
need
with
to explain what SRP is. You got to remember, not
okay,
everybody speaks
yeah,
military jargon.
yeah. So soldier readiness processing. So SRP is just the process of before you leave for a deployment or before you, when you come home from a deployment, and just like getting your record straight, getting things updated, making sure, you've got what you need. I don't know, that kind of stuff really. And so when we came home, like being diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, I remember my squad leader walking up to me, and they'd gone through SRP the day before, and I was in a different group. And he was like, "Oh, hey, by the way, this applies to you." And I was like, "For what?" Because I had already moved on. And he was like, "Well, remember that IED, and like this was a traumatic brain injury, and they want us to fill this out. So you need to make sure you fill out, that checklist, that box. The Army has forms for everything." So, and I was like, "Okay, whatever." And it didn't really occur to me. I didn't put two and two together at the time. Because other people, even like I was a medic. So if the medics don't understand the effects of traumatic brain injuries, then nobody else does either, But I know now I can go back and be like, my being hit with something like that, like my thought processing was compromised. My ability to, like, my eyesight changed significantly in between because part of SRP is getting your eyes checked. And I already wore glasses, so I already, had a prescription, but my vision changed from the year before to the year afterwards. And there was a big jump. But then I started having headaches, and not just like little headaches, but like the kind where like you can't work through it, and they just, for weeks at a time, the headaches there's no break in them, so they just don't stop. And I think that out of all of that, like even like now my ears will ring, or there's just so much. And I think it's just, there's a lot of little things too. Like I just forget things kind of easy. That could just be because I have a lot going on, but it also could be because,
well, you have the whole passel of children too. So
I do. Yeah. And the VA, if I go into the TBI clinic at the VA, that's what they say. They're like, "Oh, well, you have a lot of kids. No wonder you can't remember anything." I'm like, "Yeah, but guys, focus." What about this too, though?
The VA clinic people have clearly not taken their ADHD drugs. So, or
Yeah.
or they're taking the wrong drugs. One of the, so
It might be both.
Yeah, but you might be taking your drugs too. Who knows?
Yeah.
While I have you here, I would like to, I co-host a show on Red America Media and New Right Network called Veteran Nation with a guy named Mike Skipper Arthur. We forgive him for being a Marine and then ultimately becoming an officer. So yeah, but I'd love to have you on there as well to talk about your experience and your campaign for school board. But so you end up being diagnosed with a TBI, and then everybody's new favorite, besides what we used to refer to as multiple personality disorder. It was a dissociative identity disorder now is what they're calling it. But the new one for everybody is everybody's got PTSD. You can't talk to anybody anymore. And like, I got PTSD, and you're looking, I'm like, okay, are you making a joke? And they're like, no, I'm serious. I have PTSD. I'm like, oh yeah, what happened to you? And they're like, well, this one time this guy yelled at me in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And so you ended up with not just a TBI, but you ended up with a PTSD diagnosis as well, which I think is, I don't want to say it's understandable, because I can't name anybody who has served since we started the war on terror. Enough already.
Yeah. I've got that book too.
Mine's signed.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Oh no, I knocked my empty cup. Yeah, see.
Yeah, he was just in Minnesota too, and I couldn't get down there.
I know, I emceed that event
Ah,
along with James Gentleman.
yeah, I'm jealous. I don't fangirl over a lot of people, but he would be one of them.
It's so funny because when I introduced Scott, That's exactly like, I do not fanboy. Or people are like, Jesse Ventura is going to be there, and I'm like, yeah, so.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean, yeah, so? I'm like, Scott Horton is coming.
Yeah, that's
So,
how I feel.
and so, but yeah, anyway, there, I can't name anybody that's been in the theater, combat theater, an area of operation where there has been warfare happening that, well, except for maybe Eye Patch McCain, but anyway, um, uh, who probably doesn't have a valid reason to have PTSD, and at the same time are the last people to want to talk about their PTSD. And
Yeah.
while everybody else is out there running around, which one do you think has been the biggest hurdle for you to overcome since separating from the military and getting out of a combat zone? And I mean, and literally seeing the blood and guts of what um, illegal war is all about. Has it been dealing with the TBI, or do you think that the PTSD has made it harder?
A lot of those symptoms overlap
Oh yeah.
first. So, and then I remember I was probably 2008. And my husband had been, we had ETS to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And so he was a
Did
drill
you
sergeant
marry
there.
another
And
soldier?
I did. Yeah. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I did. you know, after
I saw
going
his
through
picture.
something,
He looks an awful lot like a Scottish Highlander, by the way.
I'm going to tell him you said that. He might not be offended. Yeah, but I remember like after coming back from Iraq and just being like, I could never be with a man that where I would have to explain like what Iraq was like. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I couldn't just go and out and date people and they were all like talking about what they did in their cubicle for work all day long and be able to relate to that at all.
Right.
So we met and hit it off.
I had the worst
and
customer on the phone today. It was just so bad. It's horrible. They were so rude. They wouldn't pay their bill, and you're over here going, 12-year-olds tried to blow me up.
Yeah, that would be probably
Like
accurate.
12-year-olds. Like
Yeah.
a little old lady with gray hair yelled at you and threatened to send you charcoal for Christmas. 12-year-olds tried to blow me up. Shut up, you pansy.
Yep. So I don't remember where I was going with that at all. Do you?
Well, something about ETSing and trying to determine which one's been harder to
Oh,
deal with. Yeah.
oh yeah.
We sidetrack here all the time. So.
Okay. Like I do too. I'm like, oh wait, scroll. As far as like PT, I think that the PTSD to some degree, like there was just like I said in 2014 when ISIS and that whole thing, I think really for me being able to get through that was very healing because it put me on a track of where like I had like I could no longer just sit back passively and just accept what happened. It put me on a track where I had to actively, like, I was going to overcome this and I was going to do something about this. And I was going to be part of something bigger that, like, helped tie the hands of a government that made that possible and made that, those kinds of scenarios and situations happen and keep them from being able to do that in the future. And so because of that's how I've been able to overcome that, is being able to do something with that energy instead of letting it just fester.
So fast forward, you get out, your husband gets out. You're not a Minnesota native.
No. Nope.
Is your hubby a Minnesota native?
Yeah, that's how I ended up here. And I made the mistake of telling him that I was never moving to Minnesota. So here we are.
Yeah, well, we see how that went. So,
yeah, I'm from New Orleans area originally.
Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. You okay?
Yeah, I was not about 8 years
I
ago.
was not.
Yeah. I've had some
No.
time to, like just be like, okay, this is the way it is. Maybe winter's not as bad as I initially thought. We're going to be okay.
Well, We'll be all
But
right.
then I moved to Bemidji, which is almost as far north as you can get and not be Canadian, really.
Almost, yeah. I mean, but did you know that Minnesota in the contiguous United States, Minnesota has the northernmost part of the country.
Yeah,
No
because the
other
curvature.
state,
Yep.
and no other state goes as far north as Minnesota does. Everybody's like, it's got to be Maine, and I'm like, nope, it's us.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not, you got to look at the longitude, latitude, whatever lines they
You're
are.
breaking into homeschool mode now.
Yeah, sorry. Yep.
So you guys end up settling down. You get married, you settle down in Minnesota, and you decide you're going to start having children. And the when did you decide you were going to home educate, and why?
Well, we moved here with 6 kids already. So,
Ah,
yeah, we already had a few. And then when my oldest was in kindergarten, I'd been homeschooling her prior to kindergarten. So we didn't do any preschool or any of that kind of stuff. We just, went straight to public school kindergarten. And at the time, we made that choice because we also had foster kids, and the foster kids had to be in the public schools. So it was going to be easier for me to coordinate and just manage everything if everybody did the same school. So my oldest was the only one that was school age. She went to public school because the foster kids were going to public school. But then when she got in, I realized that she was ahead of all the other kindergartners. And I was like, oh, so, I guess I was doing something right.
despite all
But
the
then
people
when the
telling you that your kids were going to be socially retarded and unable to interact with society. Yeah.
Yeah, that I think that's a myth that most people just don't even bring up anymore because it's been like there's so many you just learn how to overcome that so quickly. The weirdest kids because I was public schooled, the weirdest kids I knew were all in public school with me. So I'm not sure that's a good basis for what normal is.
Right, and weird kids in public school end up shooting up the school.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. They're quiet, they were still quiet. I don't understand what happened. Well, they were weird. So, so you guys end up leaving the South,
Hmm.
which in coming, north, and you end up settling down now and you don't have to say specifically where you're at, but I mean, obviously, if you're in a school for school board, people are going to be able to find out. But you end up settling down in a relatively agrarian, rural part of the country of the state. Rocks
Yeah.
and cows, as our
Yep.
esteemed governor has called us. And you said, you know what, screw it. The kids are all going to be homeschooled because I'm an anti-government wacko and I want to train all my kids to take over City Hall.
For me, it was a very practical decision. I actually went to college for being a teacher. So I went through I got a bachelor's in English, and I went through that, graduated with honors, and then went to graduate school for education. And this was all happening while we were still in South Carolina, actually. So while I was in graduate school and I was working on certification for teaching, I was able to be in the public schools and doing observing the teachers and interacting with them and being in the classroom. And I very quickly realized that the teachers that I were following around, they were spending the majority of their day doing paperwork. And that wasn't the kind of teacher I wanted to be. I didn't want to, just the focus of my day had to be like this amount of paperwork on each kid and then this amount of stuff. And it was all very regulated. And to some degree, I can understand that, when you're trying to maintain a standard for education. But when it becomes the sole focus of school, then you've lost sight of the purpose. And so I realized that if I finished my my master's degree, that I was going to get a teaching certification and I was going to work in the schools, and my kids would be in the very schools that I didn't agree with. So I dropped out of college and started homeschooling instead. And for us now at this point, reject the schools. I realize that they serve a purpose, and there's a lot of people that get great things out of them. But I really like the way that our family interacts with each other, where we're just, with each other all day long. And my older kids aren't spending all their time in school. They also get to, be with us as the younger kids are growing up. And, there's just something very wholesome about.
Well, yeah, because you can make them go out and collect the eggs and slop the hogs and
Yeah.
shovel. I mean and they can do all of that from their bedrooms in their pajamas, because that's all that homeschool people do is they sit around in their pajamas all day and eat bonbons and watch TV.
Well, sometimes that is true, I guess. But
I'm an old homeschool pro. My kids didn't spend a single day in government indoctrination centers. And when I say
okay.
that I'm an old homeschool pro, what I mean is I didn't do any of it. So
Your wife.
I was the superintendent
Okay, makes sense.
and the school board. So
Yep. My oldest, actually, she did go to the high school for high school.
Really?
So I don't know.
You have a
Yep,
kid
I
in
don't
high
know
school?
if the other kids. I have. Yeah, she graduated already. So I have 3 teenagers now.
How's that
Actually,
make you feel?
Old. That makes me feel old.
I have grandkids, kiddo, grandkids. So
Okay. Well, she's only 2 years younger than how old I was when she was born. So we'll see.
yeah. Yep. Yeah. So how much of your religious or spiritual I mean, I saw your post yesterday about how you were not feeling well. You picked something up from the kids and it was going through your house like with a ferocity in a very short period of time. But you had said, well, sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it to church tonight. So I'm assuming you're coming from a Judeo-Christian background.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. We attend an independent Christian church. So it's just, we don't have
Very
we
libertarian
don't
of
have
you.
doctrine. We just have Bible. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This is the wrong channel. That would be a conversation for my my Christian channel, if you will. But
You
I will
have a
be
lot of
exploring
channels.
that. Huh?
You have a lot of channels.
I have 2. One that nobody likes, and then the other one. So,
Okay.
We'll explore that in future conversations. So, just because I love those conversations. I think they're great. I wish more people were not afraid to have them. To be honest with you, but so your spirituality, your Christianity plays some role in your decision to homeschool. But here you are homeschooling. Your oldest has now gone to a government school, government operated school, has graduated, is often, doing, whatever adult children do. And you're like, okay, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And not only are you on the executive committee for the Minnesota Libertarian Party, but you're running for school board in your school district. And how has the public received that? Just the public. We'll touch on the other parts of the public in a minute, but how has the public in general received that? Have you received a lot of pushback going, why do you care?
A little bit, yeah. And then, so the one thing I do have going for me is that because my oldest was in the high school, people are like, oh, okay. Like for me, it's not, I don't know. It's a little, so I guess there's some validation that people, they're looking for a school board member or a potential one, that, if you have kids, that they have to use the system. You can't just, there's some people that have this idea that you can't be invested in what happens with the kids in the schools unless you have kids in the schools, which doesn't really make sense to me, but there's a lot of people that think that. So, but I can say that my oldest did go to high school for high school. But for me, that wasn't. It was a practical. The decisions to make that were more practical and less, philosophical or anything like that. So
I don't know. It feels an awful lot like love your neighbor to me.
yeah, I mean, the Bemidji schools are going through a lot of things that are a lot of challenges. So there's a lot of budget problems. There's a lot of distrust, a lot of trust issues in the community versus the school board. So it's just, I figured like I just felt pushed, and not pushed, but like it just kept coming up in my
You got the
mind.
nudge.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, maybe this is something I could do. No, I don't want to. Like, I don't have time. And that was like the internal conversation. It's like, I could do this. Do I want to do this? Do I have time to do this? And then I was like, all right, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And if I don't get it, I don't get it. And there's the end result. But who knows what the purpose is? Maybe the purpose of being here isn't even to win. I don't know. So we'll see.
You're in good company, by the way. Susie Q from Not a Real Libertarian is in the she was. I don't know how many people are actually watching right now, but she was in the audience watching, and she is also an educator like you. And she still teaches. I think she teaches at the community college level now, but she's gone through her own struggles, and she has riled people up on school boards in her area so much so that they canceled her contract, and she's coming on Monday night to talk about that. So,
Yeah.
Susie, thanks for stopping by. For me, I think the people who are most vested in the school district are the taxpayers. And whether or not you have
Right.
children in the school district, to me, is kind of a straw man argument of, well, you don't have kids in the school district, you shouldn't even be interested in this. Well, one, I am interested because the school district has the highest amount of power to tax me.
Right.
Well, literally. Huh?
There is that. Yeah. I mean,
and they could do it over and over and over again. Like you just, hey, guess what? We're doing another operating levy this year. And next year we're going to do a different type of levy. And in the year after that, we're going to do another one. And then we're going to send all of the rodents home and make them put pressure on their parents to vote for it. Because if you don't vote for this, mom and dad, the school's going to shut down. We're all going to be homeless street urchins, and you're going to be stuck with us. And so you're going to have to vote for this referendum. I mean, I've seen this down here in my city, in the little town that I live in. Like, I'm on like the opposite corner of this. Like, I'm southeast Minnesota. You're way up north. But even down here, our school district literally sends the kids home with propaganda.
Yeah. Well, we had 2 operating levies in Bemidji that both failed. So the taxpayers here 2 times in a row have put down their foots and said, put down their foots. That's terrible grammar. Put down their feet and said no.
You are a home educator.
Oops. So.
With a degree even.
Yeah. At some point, I'm just like, I need adult conversation. I pick up like the poor grammar.
You picked the wrong show to come on. So I look at it and I go, really, the way the school district operates and runs, from just a fiduciary perspective, is really is in the interest of friends and family members and people who maybe don't have kids in the school district at all, who their grandkids are 1,500 miles away in some other city in another state, and but you are coming after my property. You're literally, you're taking my property from me to pay for a failing system in the state of Minnesota. Minnesota is at the top of the list of government education in the United States. I'm like, the competition's not real strong. So you're still taking my money. And so, like down here, we have Senator Jeremy Miller, and if you and since you're involved in politics out in the ExCom for the Libertarian Party, I'm sure you know who Jeremy Miller is. But he's the House majority or the Senate Majority Leader, and he's running around as a Republican, bragging. I backed and supported and voted for the largest education spending bill in the history of the state of Minnesota. What? Like, how's that working out for you? You're a Republican, and so I look at that and I go, how can you back that up when we have a failing education system? We have a failing education system. And so it does, I think, is especially for somebody who's coming from a libertarian mindset, and you just received an endorsement from the Mises Caucus.
Mm-hmm.
So you
I did.
literally are small government, like hands off my money, don't tax me. That's theft kind of mentality. I mean, Mises would not endorse you if you weren't the right type, for them. So I think it's in the best interest of every person, to be involved. So you did it. You registered. Did you? What was that conversation like with the hubby?
He's actually very easygoing. So, there's like, I realized, I thought when we met, Army? I was like, oh, he was infantry.
And he's easygoing?
Yeah.
And he was a drill sergeant?
I'm never going to complain. I'm never going to claim that this makes sense. But I thought when we met, I was like, he is like steady, and he's not letting his emotions get the best of him. And then so I was like, oh, he's just, he's consistent, and he's got everything under control. He's good. I thought that that's what all that, meant. And then when we moved up here to Minnesota,
he is not under control.
Well, I realized that his entire family is like that. It's not like so much as that they don't have emotions, is that they just like suppress them, and that they don't, I don't know, it just doesn't like come out.
They're Minnesotans.
So, yeah. Very, low-key, but coming from New Orleans, everybody down there is just like high energy, high everything, like looking for, the next party or the next fight or whatever it is, just ready to like brawl no matter what the reason is.
Well, I mean, New Orleans is nothing more than Boston or Philadelphia in the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, with like, beads.
Yeah, beads.
So when I was like, hey, I want to do this, he just was like, okay. And that was it. That was the conversation.
So. And he was a drill sergeant?
Yeah.
They must have just whipped that right out of him. He was like, I'm done. I don't even care anymore.
Yeah, he was a drill and infantry. He was he's just always been that kind of guy. I think that was why he did so good.
Was he the good guy drill sergeant or the bad guy drill sergeant?
I'd say he was probably the good guy drill sergeant. He doesn't actually look very old when he's shaved either. So, I mean, if it had been me, I would have been like, I wouldn't have taken, I did really bad in the Army, by the way. I was not a good soldier. I questioned people, and I didn't take orders very well. And
oh, no. Yeah, I was not. Like, my parents were like, okay, you're not sticking it out with college, so you got an option. Get out of the house and get a full-time job, or join the military. And I was like, military sounds good to me. And I don't take orders well. I'm not a follower.
I don't either.
I am not a follower. I mean, I do it because like they tell you to do something, you do it, and you don't want to like face repercussions. And I'm just like, yeah, this isn't working for me. So
yep.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's funny that you say that because I'm a lot older than you. Let's put it that way. And I was in when Operation or Task Force Dagger went down in Somalia.
Okay.
Dagger? Yeah. Anyway, Black Hawk Down. And I was in, during that time, and I was at Fort Bragg when that happened, and I went off, and I've told the story on the channel a couple of times, but I never get tired of telling it because it shows how stupid I am. We used to go right off of Fort Bragg right off the corner of Fort Bragg and into Hope Mills. There was a Taco Bell just right across, really just kind of right across the road. And me and my buddy was an MP. We used to get together for lunch 2-3 times a week. Chris, if you ever watch this, you know what I'm talking about. You were there that day. And the news had broke, but they wouldn't let anybody onto any of the media onto the fort to come in because, Delta was pretty much Delta Force headquartered at Bragg for the most
Yep.
part. And then they were working with guys from Special Operations Aviation Unit in a regiment out of Fort Campbell. And I'm standing in line at Taco Bell. I'm standing in line at Taco Bell, people, at lunchtime. I have an hour. And I got to wait in line. And there's this guy from the media. Do you guys want to talk about what happened? Do you want to talk about what happened? Do you want to talk about what happened? And I'm like, dude, you're slowing us down. And he was like, well, yeah, but nobody will talk to me. I said, nobody wants to talk to you. He goes, well, how do you feel about what happened? I'm like, you really want to know how I feel? You really, really want to know how I feel? President Clinton is a murderer. He murdered those troops. And his eyes were just like, because I'm in uniform. I'm not, he murdered those troops. He murdered those troops. They requested.
So did they hear that?
Oh yeah, they heard it. I'm like, I went through and they requested armor support and were told no, the show of force was too much. I went through and broke down how they requested all the armor and they requested all the backup. They said we shouldn't be doing it this way. And I went in got on post because I lived off post and got on post and went into the day room waiting for the PT formation, and came walking in and all of a sudden I heard, Pearson, get your ass in the old man's office right now. And there's a short little Hispanic first sergeant in the company.
Oh, they're the worst too.
Oh yeah. And he had this big old smile on his face yelling at me, and everybody's like, oh, this is not. I went in there and the company commander's like, you better get your ass at attention, soldier. And I'm like, do you understand exactly what kind of crap show you have brought down upon your head at this very moment, soldier? And I'm like, I have a very good idea what I'm looking at. And he just chewed me up one side and down the other and told me if anything like that ever happened again, I could expect to be drummed out of the military. And it's funny because that captain was from in the area I live now, which wasn't a plan on my part. I had no idea. I wonder where he's at anyway. He chewed me up one side and down the other. And then as I was leaving, he stood up and I went to go salute him, and he saluted me and goes, by the way, you're 100% right. Now get your ass out of my office. And yeah, so I got chewed out because I had to, but so yeah, I was not. I'm a lot more like you than I am like your hubby. I'll tell you that. I was not the kind of person I didn't pull punches even back then. So, and it always seems to haunt me. I don't understand why. So you put your hat in the ring, so to speak. Should I say your head covering, because I notice you do cover a lot. Is that
it's just I'm getting old and my hair is thin.
Oh, jeez. I didn't know if that was a spiritual conviction or
no,
because I have friends that are like that, and so hey, awesome. But so you threw your hat in the ring for school board, and of course, being the open-minded, small government, local activist, libertarian or liberty-minded constitutional originalists that they are, the local Republican Party decided that they were going to remain above the fray in a non-political race, and didn't say anything about you at all.
No, they didn't. They were very cordial and professional. Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, that's hey, great, thanks for coming on the show. So no, you ran afoul of the meat grinder that is Republican politics in the state of Minnesota, because they came after you like you were part of the insurrection on January 6th.
Yeah, and so they made a list of everybody that was running and a short description on for each of our names, and pulled that information through various sources. Didn't reach out to people individually to get that information, just got it from wherever it was they got it from, and had like just a little couple of lines about people. And yeah, mine was probably the worst on for the description of everybody. Mine was the worst, really.
So can you, I mean, if it's traumatic, I understand, but they said some things that were incredibly,
Yeah.
let's be
So
generous, misleading about you.
yeah, they called me daily cannabis user. That's those 3 words, daily cannabis user. Which to a completely uninformed person sounds like I just sit on my couch and smoke pot all day, every day. So
So
yep,
so you are a daily cannabis user.
I am actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
But ladies and gentlemen, here on the
But
Minnesota
not
Black
in the
Girl
way that
Regiment
like, I just
podcast,
smoke joints.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, here on the Minnesota Black Girl Regiment podcast, we may not advocate for laws against marijuana, but we do not advocate that you go out and actively break laws just to see if you can get away with it. But
Right.
your cannabis use, if you will, your THC use or whatever they want to say, isn't what they were trying to. Like it was a miscommunication. They were literally doing it especially in a place like Bemidji.
Yeah.
Like there are still
Yep.
people up
And
there who have no idea what pot looks like.
right. Well, because all it is the CBD oil.
Right.
So it's no THC, or if there is, it's negligible.
Right.
I've never been high, but I use it for the TBI, for the headaches. That was the only thing that ever worked to control the headaches that did not have worse side effects. And so
Strange.
that's why I use it. And
completely
that's all it is. Really, it's very
a completely natural substance found occurring in nature, thus the term natural substance, has a beneficial effect on a man-made condition
yeah,
that you experience at the hands of the government.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
And that same government also doesn't want you to be able to use those types of things to treat the condition that they're directly responsible for causing in you.
Right. Yeah. I
And the
mean,
Minnesota
when
GOP, being what it is, had to make sure that they got in on board with that to try and smear your character. Which, by the way, just so people know, things like Delta 8 and Delta 9, which actually do have THC in them, are legal in Minnesota. And like literally legal. Like you can gummies and pre-rolled and things like that. You can use those and there's nothing they can do to you about it. But you could also be addicted to Ativan or
right.
Xanax, but that wouldn't ever make it out there. They wouldn't ever dream of putting that into a statement about a person who's running for school board, I would imagine, because, those
Right.
man-made chemicals are perfectly legal and have to be safe.
Yeah. So when I got out of the Army and I was, really the symptoms and everything were just kind of starting to take off. Well, not starting to, but that was where I was just the way the Army handled, if you were having a hard time with what was happening in Iraq or like things that were just kind of bigger than you, the way they helped you handle it was just by simply medicating you.
Oh,
And you would just go into, we always had a psych doc with us, and they would just write up the prescriptions whenever they were antidepressants, diazepam for just, being generally relaxed, and sleep aids, pain medications. All of those things were just prescribed like candy. And so when I got out of the Army, I had like a list of prescriptions because I got out of the Army because I was really having a hard time with everything that had happened between the 2 deployments. And I was burnt out. So, but then I realized that, if you skipped a few days of medicines, and like I have trouble remembering things, right? So like that's also part of like having a TBI is just you generally have trouble remembering. And I was having trouble keeping up with, how many pills during what times of the day I needed to take, or just even like taking a daily antidepressant,
Mm-hmm.
or, the antidepressant and then whatever other medicines. And then there was also things like the antidepressants would eventually, your body would get used to it and you just had to keep increasing the dosage until you were max dose. And then they would just add a second antidepressant. And then you would start on that one in addition to your first one.
And max that out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you miss a day or two and you just don't remember to take the pills, then your body would go into like, cold turkey mode where you would just
Yeah, there'd be
really
no
like,
there's no titration at that point. You're not tapering yourself off,
no.
which is the only safe
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and that happened several times and it was just simply because I just had forgotten to take the pills. And, your body just can't go without the chemicals anymore. And so then you were having these severe negative experiences like full hallucinations, severe depression, severe everything that made like the depression or the anxiety made that look like, rookie level depression. And it was 2010 where I was just like, I've had enough. I'm not doing this anymore. And it took me about 6 months to get off of all the prescription pills by weaning off slowly, one step at a time. And every couple of weeks, I would just go down another step, go through the whole, because every time you have a drop, you go through the negative effects of that drop. And then once you have gotten adjusted, then you do another drop, and then it goes through the negative effects of that. But it took about 6 months to get off of that. And it took years for my body to not be like, I need this Alexa. I'm having a hard time. I need that pill. And even now, if I go into the VA and get seen for my annual physical, they still offer them to me. So like that option is still always there.
I have a lot of there again, especially because of the Veteran Nation show. I have these conversations with people over and over and over again. It's probably people are going to be upset if I say this, but it's anybody's experienced it, especially once you separate and you've now moved into veteran status. They just stop caring.
Yeah,
And
I would say so. Yeah.
what they do for you while you're on active duty is just precursor to them not caring. Here, just take these pills. Take these pills. We need to keep you functional. And
Yeah.
once if we can keep you functional, then we don't care really, what happens afterwards, which is why, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. Like I'm, very concerned about the 22 a day. Very concerned. But there's always this talk about raising awareness. Like there's nobody in the United States today that has anybody that's been in the military and is now a vet who isn't aware of the 22 a day. Raising awareness isn't the problem. We have to do something to address it. We have to do something to fix it. And it's got to start in the military, and it's got to really start by ending all these stupid wars, these stupid deployments that are scarring people like you. And, and I won't speak to your hubby. I'm sure he's probably got his own. I mean, he was a drill sergeant.
He's got
I'm sure
stories.
he's probably terrified to go to sleep at night, honestly, after being a drill sergeant. It's got probably more terrifying than actually being deployed, frankly. But we've got to do something on the front end so that people aren't experiencing these events that are going to cause the things like the TBIs and the PTSD or complex PTSD or whatever it might be. And then we've got to do something for those that we have put in harm's way for stupid reasons, because that's, I think, has been the most deleterious aspect for veterans of the war on terror has been, I did all of that for what? Why did
Right.
what for what did I experience all of that for? When I look back on it in hindsight and realize that it was unnecessary. Like,
Right.
we had to kill him there so that we don't have to, so we don't get killed here. Like, that literally isn't what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think that
and at the
weighs on people.
expense of our, like our friends, because
Yeah.
when you go to a situation like that, you are really are bonded to all the people around you that are going through the same situation at the same time. And then, like in our case, we were people were just dropping all the time. Like we took, I mean, just the casualty level was just so significant. And people that, like, I had a friend, I went and I would play spades with them. He was in a different battalion, and I would play spades with them every day. And then
You probably have
after, like, and
PTSD
then
from bad spades games, honestly.
yeah. And one day he just quit showing up and nobody mentioned anything. And after a little while, it was just like, hey, where'd Beard go? That was his name. And they're like, oh, he was killed by a sniper. And as it turned out, the sniper that had killed him was a mission that I was on. I was the medic for that mission. But we had taken so many casualties that day that I didn't even realize he was one of them. And so you just kind of, when you're going through something like that, and it was just kind of the attitude when people are just, he's gone, and you compartmentalize that because you have to, because you still have to get through all the rest of your days on your
Embrace the
deployment.
suck, right, sister?
Yeah. Yep.
How sick of
But
that
then
were
when you
you?
get home, you have time to stop and think about
Don't you get sick of hearing it? Embrace the suck. Like, I can't embrace any more suck. If I
it.
embrace
Yeah.
any more suck, I'm literally going to suck. That's what's going to happen. I cannot embrace. I will become a black hole. I cannot embrace any more suck. And
Yeah.
this is coming from a guy who didn't go through anything compared to you. Like, see here, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. What I experienced was nothing compared to what you experienced. Like, thank you for. I mean, I could see it in your face, and so I appreciate you talking about it in that respect. Because there again, it ties into where you're at now, socio-culturally, socio-politically, and then this decision to run for the school board, and this. I want people to understand that the Minnesota GOP, the grand old party, the Republicans, the pro-military people, the pro-veteran people, the people who are supposed to be on the side, like, if there's a war, gosh darn it, we're going to follow Bill Kristol anywhere he wants to take us in a war. If Bulldog Maddox wants to take us to a war, gosh darn it, that's the patriotic. We get behind the military. And the Minnesota GOP looks at a person who served in the military, served in their freaking war that they wanted. The Republicans started this war.
Yep.
This goes back to George Bush 1 before he was ever president. He created the framework that caused this freaking war to happen. Looks at you as a military veteran with a traumatic brain injury, with PTSD, and they decide to smear you as a pot-smoking hippie who clearly is unqualified to be on the school board because you use cannabis on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, the
Nope.
hippie part is accurate, I would say, but
I don't know. Does being a hippie jive with the Mises endorsement? I mean,
I didn't ask, honestly. It might not. I might
did.
be
You
disqualified.
did. Well, you're going to get a call. Yeah, this is the Mises caucus. Yeah, we've decided that you're a hippie. So Tom Woods and Dave Smith said no.
My husband, when my son was about 2 or 3 years old, he taught him how to call me a dirty hippie.
Oh, I think I like him already. So
Yeah.
Do you, coming into this as a candidate for school board, is your focus the betterment of the education system in the Bemidji school district? As in, cut out the fat, cut out all the social politics, cut out all the, the culture war, cut out the social justice warrior stuff, cut out, you're not coming at it like, oh, bring in all these conservative principles, even with the Mises endorsement.
No.
But you're not saying bring in all of this because this, you're saying let's get down to the nuts and bolts of it in the Bemidji school district. I'm running for the school board because I want what for the education system here?
I would like to see the Bemidji schools being used as an example across the country of like how the schools are done properly. So that could mean we really be able to keep like our local schools and having the integrity of our local schools, and seeing that, the way that a quality education and revitalizing like the basics of an education. So really like focusing on, kids being able to read well and being able to, compete with math on a larger scale, because right now across the country, math and science and those kinds of subjects the United States keeps falling further and further behind on a global theater. We just aren't as competitive. We're not cranking out students that are as competitive as like other countries are. And we just keep falling behind in that list. So like, and I think a lot of that is just, when we spend our time focusing or expecting teachers to do the paperwork and to follow the regulated side of schooling, or we spend time with, arguing about social engineering or all of these kinds of things that have absolutely nothing to do with the quality of quality of education. And so cutting out all that extra stuff, but rethinking about the way that we manage the schools in general. So it would be reaching out to legislators, because right now, the reason that, for instance, Bemidji schools are having budget problems is because of the amount of mandates that the state passes down to the schools individually, and are just like, here's what you have to do, but we're not going to give you any way to pay for it. You just need to figure out how to pay for it yourself. So that's where like the referendums and those kinds of things and levies, that's where those come into play, because the state's like, you have to provide this, but we're not going to give you any money to do it. You just have to provide it within our regulations. And then you just got to have to figure out how to pay for it. Yeah. And so the Bemidji schools are different in a way that our area that we provide education is much larger than a lot of the school districts in the state, just because of where we are. There's, we're not in a densely populated area. We're very rural. And so the Bemidji, like the school buses, travel over 1 million miles per school year trying to get kids to school. And school buses are one of those mandated things by the state. Like, you have to provide this no matter where the student lives, but it doesn't necessarily provide how to pay for it either. So that's one of the things. But like, if the system were working the way it was supposed to, with the way that, it would be working. So the fact that it's not tells me that we need to go back, do this legitimately, like through the state, the courts, the legislator, whatever it takes, and reorganize and rethink the way that we mandate school. If it needs to be, but it would be better, because nobody knows Bemidji's set of circumstances better than Bemidji. So if we could just maintain the integrity and be able to make some of our own choices, and like try to fund things or, whatever, have more power here versus what they're just telling us to do from St. Paul, the schools would operate better.
When you, so I'm gonna put your libertarian creds on the hot seat, okay? Idealistically, because I have been an advocate for disbanding government-run education for years, mostly because I think anything the government touches, it ruins. I mean, it can't even run the military well. So I mean, like the one job, the one job that the founding fathers knew. Okay, concentrate on a military. We don't want a standing army, but if you got to do something, concentrate on national defense.
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna screw that up too. Like we're like, bro, right out of the gate, just want to let you know we're gonna screw that up. We're gonna do that. We're gonna screw it up. 2022 rolls around. We got commanders in the military now saying the greatest threat to American security is global warming and idealized hate against the transgender community. That's the greatest threat to American security. It's so when I look at education, which was predominantly and you're a education student, literally. When we look at education in the United States, in this republic, education was never a government entity. It was never intended to be, and really up until John Dewey came along, education was always in the hands of the community. It was always up to the local churches, the local neighborhoods to determine how to educate their children, how they were going to be schooled, how they were going to manage that. Sure, we can look back and sometimes wax eloquent about the wonderful yesteryear, and there were obviously going to be some problems with it. But would you look now as a person who's running for school board and say, ultimately the goal of liberty-minded people would be that we get to a point where education is either completely in the hands of the parents or completely privatized? Do you think that would be, pie in the sky, best case scenario, but you're a libertarian?
Right.
So
yeah, if the schools could be, ideally, in an ideal world, if they were completely privatized and there was, like the schools because you would have to have something that was marketable. So if you put your kids in a school and the school completely failed at giving them an education, that school would naturally it would be disbanded, and because nobody would be going to that school because it's a poor school. So if it was completely privatized, then you would have competition within the market to provide a higher quality of education because that's what people expect. Now, when we have public schools, we have, the government-run schools, and no matter what the quality of education is, it doesn't matter because the state government is going to prop it up. So there's not really an incentive.
Kind of like they prop up big car companies.
Yeah. So there's not an incentive to be like, well, we need to address these certain problems. Now, Minnesota is a little different than other states. And I don't know which states are like Minnesota, but in Minnesota, you don't have to send your kids to the school that's just down the road from your house just because you're in that school district. You can choose to send your kids to a school wherever it is you want to send them to.
Yeah, there is open enrollment within the state of Minnesota.
Right.
If you're willing to make the effort to transport them 35 miles or whatever, more power to you.
Right. So that's one of the problems that Bemidji is running into, is that Bemidji has gotten such a bad rep of, and that really it stemmed from all the things COVID. Bemidji schools lost a significant amount of population of students. through the COVID lockdowns that just have not come back, even though COVID is over, right?
Just so you cannot use that word anymore.
Okay.
You
I
have to
won't.
say coof.
Okay.
COOF. Coof.
Coof. I'll
Coof.
see what I
Yes.
can do.
Yeah. I will drum that into your
But
head,
there,
soldier.
so okay. No
It gets me
promises.
demonetized. What? I
Oh,
live
good
off my
point.
YouTube earnings. This is really
Yeah,
just
good point.
recycled coffee. So
So that disease of which we will not name, like
yeah, the
Voldemort.
coof. Yes. So I personally think that the last 2.5 years with the coof pandemic being what it was, I actually think it was a boon to people like you and people like me to be able to look at people and say, okay, you had to have your kids. And I heard that so much. I wish this was over so I could get my kids back out of the house. I'm like, what?
My kids
Yeah,
weren't
I got.
affected about it at all because they were already at home. So we just kind of went
Like,
about our day normally.
I was just thinking about this today. You know whose kids didn't suffer during the lockdowns? The homeschoolers. Everybody else is
Yeah.
like, I haven't seen my friends in 4 weeks. All the homeschool kids are like, we don't have any friends. What are you talking about? So, but I play with my brothers and sisters. You know how gross that is? But the thing that has been, and I'm not the only one that's posited this, but the thing that has been so eye-opening for the average American who's maybe on the cusp of having their eyes opened is like, they teach what in your school? They 35 minutes of lecturing you on how to be woke in a math class? Like, what? And so I think that's why you've seen people, and so Sarah, who is from Owatonna, who I know personally, we've met face to face, and I know the person she's referring to here is April. I've literally gone to war with them in the sense of school board fights because they were fighting the Owatonna School District on a lot of this stuff, and I've been over there. I documented several of their school board meetings where their school board literally was just trying to shut down any dissent, and that
Hmm.
motivated April to run. And a lot of this came about because of what the parents were learning, because they were walking by the kids sitting at home doing school, and they're like, what did they just say to you?
Right.
What 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 is this critical race theory stuff they're talking? What did they just say? So it opened people up to the reality of what was going on, and that has terrified school boards across the state of Minnesota, across the United States, and they are, Republicans and Democrats are fighting really hard against people like you because they do not want to give up the cash cow of control that is a local school district.
Yeah. There's a lot of money that goes into school districts. I think it's $14,000 per student in Bemidji, and we have 4,500 students. It was 5,000. It was right around 5,000 students before the disease of which we will not name. And then we lost about 10% of kids that just didn't come back after that. So,
But think about that, 14,000,
that's a lot of money.
14K per. You're a homeschool mom. What's your hubby's name?
Yeah.
Keith?
Yeah.
What could you and
Yep.
Keith do with $14,000
Per student?
student? What would your classroom at home look like? I mean, what kind of technology could you have? Because if you're like me, you scrimped and saved and made cuts and gave and sacrificed, and like, people don't understand how much, and we do these things out of love for our kids, and we do these things out of love for our families. But it is not, homeschooling isn't you just like sit at home and go, okay, 1+1 is 2. Can you write that 45 times? Now go outside and, pick apples.
Hmm.
Like, you scrimp and you save and you work to be able to afford curriculum.
Yeah, it's not cheap. No, it's not.
Not at all.
We reuse a lot. I realized early on that, as our family was growing, and we're not a high income family. So we're not the kind of family that's just like, oh, we're going to go on a vacation this summer, without some sort of like significant planning that has to go into that. So
We didn't take a single family vacation at all until my daughter was married and had her first kid, and we that was
yeah,
our first family vacation where we
we've
went
gone
somewhere.
to we went to Duluth last year or the year before last, and
That's like a
we
trip.
spent one day. Yeah, we spent one day. We didn't spend the night, so it was just a 3-hour drive there and a 3-hour drive home, and spent the day in Duluth in between, and did as much as we could during the day. But really, like, if we're going to do something fun as a family, it's going to be at like a public park or a lake or something.
Yep.
Where it's local. We're not going to be able to drive anywhere. We don't take trips.
Right.
It's just not in our personal budget for us to be able to do that.
Right.
But if we did have 14,000 per student, I think I would go on a trip. Like,
Well,
hey, we're going to go and do school today. We're going to go to Wyoming and we're going to go camping, and we're just going to like do school while we're there. And that sounds like a lot of fun.
But see, that right there is exactly what you're seeing happen in Arizona. If you're paying attention to the Arizona fight right
Yeah.
now,
Yep.
Arizona is on the cusp of doing something that no other state has been able to pull off, and they're like this close to being able to say,
Yeah.
you get this money to spend on your student however you see fit. And if you can explain it, government oversight again, state oversight. If you can explain how this benefits you in an educational sense, it's your money to use as you see fit, because it's your
Right.
money.
Right.
As a person
Because that
running
money follows the student no matter where the student
Yes.
goes.
Yep.
I
Would you?
don't think anything like that would happen in a state like Minnesota, not unless there's significant changes politically across the state.
Right, but it starts somewhere, right?
Yeah. The idea in reds, I think it'll take off first in red states. And then, but it would take time for a blue state to follow suit for something like that.
But imagine what would happen if people like you and April and others that I know, and I've got 2 people that I would call friends on the Farmington School Board who are of the same mindset as you and I. Imagine what would happen if people like you and others were able to step up and go, you know what, here in this particular school district, what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to do what we can to make you having educational choice a reality in this school district. And how pivotal that could be in changing the culture of education in a place like Minnesota. Because Minnesota does spend an exorbitant amount of money. And it's not just the DFL that's on board with that. It is literally the Republican Party throwing good money after bad, because somehow that's going to be what's going to increase and make Minnesota a better state when it comes to education, when really what's happening, and I'm sure this is probably even happening in Bemidji, is woke ideology, critical theory of every sort, whether it be critical race theory or critical gender theory or critical sexual theory and critical feminine theory and all that stuff, is literally inundating every single school district, public school district in the state. It's coming down from the state level that you will do this. and people are
Yeah.
going to get sick of it, but yet they're still getting taxed.
Well, there's going to have to be some sort of I've talked to teachers that are in the school district, and I don't have any, obviously, like firsthand information there, but the teachers that I have talked to, they don't see any like evidence of critical race theory being like actively pursued in Bemidji schools. Now, if that was some that, does end up coming down from the state and from the I'm trying to remember the name of the group. The group that certifies teachers in the state just went through a change of certification. So like we're changing the way that they certify teachers, and part of that change was that teachers needed to be racially sensitive, I guess is the way I would say it. So if that passes, and the teaching certification is based off of, to some degree, being racially sensitive, then there would be an open door for, things like critical race theory or, any of that kind of stuff to come into play. Now, with that being a concern, I don't like the way that I like talk to people about that have concerns about critical race theory is that if that's going to, I see it as a completely unnecessary topic, because if you're going to teach history, no matter who you are, history should just be taught accurately, the good and the bad. So if we're teaching history accurately, then things like critical race theory, which aren't even like, that's not even a topic that is that's not like a, an age appropriate topic for, elementary students or even high schoolers. That's like things that they would do in college, whatever it is they do in college. It just needs to stay there. So that's not an area I can influence. But if we just teach history accurately and not eliminate any of the facts, teach it exactly as it happened, with perspectives from everybody who is involved, not just the victors, but also like the people who lost. And I am from the South, so I do come at that from, like the Civil War. There's
The
a lot of
War of Northern
discussion. I
Aggression.
realize, yeah, there's a people up here talk about the history of the Civil War differently, very differently than they do in the South. So
Yeah, well, the people in
that's,
the North talk about it from the perspective of lies.
well, and like there were the winners. And so, and down in the South, people talk about it as, like there's still things that are happening in the South that were severely impacted. And I don't think people up here really realize that to the degree of which it still is affecting people in the South.
Well,
So,
I
but
tell
that's
people
completely different.
constantly. Well, that's a perfect example. I tell people constantly, we lost. Abraham Lincoln. He freed the slaves. Like, no, he didn't. He created an entire nation of slaves.
Well, and he didn't free all the slaves. He just freed Southern slaves.
Right.
So if we're gonna
Right.
anyways, I don't believe he's the good guy that everybody thinks he is. And
Oh
I
no,
don't,
he was an evil tyrant. Look,
yeah,
yeah, I'm a
yeah.
northerner, born and raised northerner, and I've been like, you would not believe the crap I catch, my friend, from people.
Oh,
Lincoln was a
no,
hero.
I
I'm like,
get it.
well, but it's
I get
just,
it. Yeah,
but this is a really good example of where not only are you coming at it from the perspective of a southerner, but you're also coming at it from the perspective of truth is truth.
right.
And you
And
don't get your own
that's what
truth.
history needs to be based on.
Precisely. History needs to be factual. And in this move that we're seeing, and I think libertarians are on the forefront of pointing this out, is that when you change the narrative of history to eliminate all of the negative so that we cannot talk about the negative. And that's ultimately what's happening. What schools are doing is they're making it impossible for anybody to have a open conversation about anything, good or bad. You can't, the good things that happen, if you talk about them, then you have to also couch it in terms of white supremacy or white, what's the phrase that they use all the time of white privilege. So the good things that happen in this country, well, it's only for the white people. But if you also then turn around and talk about the negatives, then you're not allowed to talk about that because that's continuing to victimize people that were oppressed in the past. What they're succeeding in doing is removing that eye-opening reality check of, we had better make sure this never happens again. When we
Right.
take these the negative aspects out, and we even take out the positives, we're left with this tabula rasa of, it's just an experiment that we have to try all over again, which is exactly why we're seeing race relations. I even hate that term, but we're seeing race relations go from being the best that they were in the history of the country to now escalating to a point of social warfare that's ultimately dangerous on a philosophical level like we've never experienced.
Yeah. And
In the
because
schools,
so
especially.
I was born in the 80s, 81. And so, that's kind of coming right out of like the
Take
post
that back. Take that back right now.
yeah. So, when Martin Luther King and everything that was happening in the South and all of the what's the name? Why can't I remember this? And they're equal rights.
It's because of all the
when all that
cannabis.
was happening. Yeah, that's it. And so going into school and being a student in schools in Mississippi in the 80s and 90s, you're really experiencing the fruition of what, equal rights wanted. Like, we were going to school together. All of us were equally. Same teachers, same everything, same lunchroom, same school bus. And there were no problems. We didn't have problems with each other. And I don't.
No, that can't possibly be true. You lived in the South.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until we moved up here, that people in the North have an idea that Southerners are still like having race problems. I'm like, no, actually, we're not. It's good now, guys. But
do you see things like school boards? So you're a libertarian. We've talked about it now. We mentioned it numerous times. Mises endorsed an executive committee for the Libertarian Party in Minnesota. Is your hubby a full-fledged libertarian too?
yeah, I pulled him into the dark side.
It's always the woman. The guy will go anywhere for the woman. You want me to do what? Rob a bank? Okay, Bonnie. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
Clyde would have
that's pretty
been
much
a
how it
good.
happened. I was just,
Clyde would have
hey,
been a good guy, but
I've
it
been
was
paying
Bonnie.
attention. I've been reading. Yeah, and like, look, you gotta like see all this stuff. You should get involved too. He was like, okay. So,
Okay, if I say yes, will you just shut up and let me watch the game?
yep.
There's something in the woods to kill. If I say yes, can I go kill it?
Yeah, I'm notoriously bad at home. Like, I can't have like just a simple, conversation about the weather or something. If I talk about something, it's always like straight into politics and religion, and people are like, like,
Yeah.
sorry.
Speaking
I'm
of the
sorry,
weather,
it's
do you
just
know what they're doing to us? Climate lockdowns are coming.
Yep.
Have you heard of Agenda 21? Yeah. So do you see, as a libertarian, do you see that the way that we change this country, being at the local level, that what we, instead of focusing on national politics, presidential elections, as I was saying in the opening, senator at the federal, state level, House of Rep at the federal state level. And I say federal state in conjunction with state, county state, and city state, because I hate the term government, because we're the government, and we've all forgotten that. I also hate the word democracy, by the way. That's going to get this video taken down on some platform somewhere. But do you see that we have an impact by getting people like you and getting people like Bull? I've given Bull a hard time about, running at the federal level, but had to do something about Fishbach. But really getting people at the most local level, TJ Hawthorne is a great example at these most local levels. I met TJ at the Defend the Guard rally, and TJ is like, "Yeah, I'm running for office. I don't even know how the hell that happened," which is the most libertarian thing in the world. I don't even know. I was just walking along. Somebody's like, "Hey, you're a libertarian. Run for office." I was like, "Okay."
Yeah, that I was kind of there when that happened, and that is true. That's pretty much how it went down.
You want me to what? Okay.
You're like, I nominate TJ, and he's like, okay, yeah.
Well, the same thing kind of happened to my friend Stephen Lowell. He walked into his Republican convention at his county level, and and nobody wanted to be senator. Nobody. Like, the Democrats were about to run unopposed, and they were like, "Who wants to do it?" And those old cartoons where they draw a line and then everybody would back up and you'd be standing up. You didn't realize they were back. That was Steven. Steven's like, "I guess it's me," and so, but do you see that the most local level, like getting people on the school boards, getting people to run for dog catcher, getting people to, animal control officer, city council, mayor, and things like that? That's where we make the difference. That's where we have local control, where you can, like I said, you can thumb your nose at the state and federal states and say, okay, withhold your money. Okay, do what you're going to do. Bring your army in here and tell us we have to teach this. Bring your army in here and tell us that we have to have permitting for chickens in town.
Yeah.
Do we make a difference there, or do you think at this point in the Republic it's a lost cause?
I hope it's not a lost cause, because if it is, then trying to save it is going to be a big hurdle to try to overcome, and it won't be pretty. So I hope that there is time still to get it back to the original intent. But if there isn't time, then whatever's going to happen, I hope it happens now while my kids are still little and don't have to take part of it. But on a local level, it's important because, the individual is the focus of, our communities. So in our communities, we need to have integrity, so that, because we can't know, like, somebody in my community can't make rules and do whatever it is we're going to do and then speak for a community that we have no part of. But basically right now, that's how it's happening. Like, we have people that have no vested interest in our local communities, who are making rules and telling people what they have to do. And, it's just coming down the pipe, like, this is the way it is. And you just have to, suck it up and deal with it.
Embrace the suck.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would be, so, yeah. But it's not necessarily in the best interest of the communities, and the communities need to have the largest voice to be able to, for what their own community needs. So my libertarian position, sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
So my libertarian position would be, that's why, like, these local positions, like school board and city council, county commissioner, those kinds of things, because this is where it starts. So if our community is also reflecting the needs of the individual and being able to just, the liberty of the individual person. And we're not just focused on the overall collective, what the group needs, which sometimes that's okay, but never at the expense of the individual. Then that will naturally just spread to, larger areas. Like, we would be able to have a representative in Congress at the federal level that also reflected what our values were here.
Do you? And I want to be respectful of your time. It says every podcaster to every guest they ever have on. I learned it from all the best. Every single one of them says it. Every single one of them. So I just started adding it in. I'm really not respectful of your time because I've been just jerking your chain for the last hour and 50 minutes. You're a homeschool mom. You could sleep in the morning.
Oh yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah. Duh. Like, kids feed themselves, and like, you're just like, go read a chapter in some book somewhere. Go watch the Tuttle Twins. I'm a libertarian. Do you think that bringing your libertarian philosophy into the realm of the public school district, as a school board member, when you win, do you think you could stir people up to that? Because you were kind of touching on this in what you were saying, but do you think you could stir other people in the community up to that local educational nullification? Do you think that that's something that the people in your area are open to?
It would depend on how you present it, because
I know you weren't prepared. This is a weird question, so
it's fine. As of now, the schools are an integral part of day-to-day culture, not just in our community, but across the United States. Like, that's just what kids do during the day for the majority of Americans. So as far as like nullification with the school districts, I wouldn't support that, not unless there was something better that people could smoothly transition to. So if there was a better alternative that, made sense, and like people are like, okay, I see the benefit of being able to go from this system to this system. And where we had the opportunity to present that. Now, I don't think we're anywhere near being ready to do something like that, because that you really would have to get a lot of people on board, and there would have to be a lot of planning that goes into place. But I would support it if there was a better alternative. And naturally, if you were to create a different system, it would have to be better for people to accept it. So,
but like I said earlier, it's got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. I mean, and the ideas of getting people back to thinking about the individual and thinking about, things that are just more liberty minded, and revitalizing what the people that really that fought and bled to found the country at a time where like the English empire was just, and I don't think people realize just how much influence the English empire had at that point in time. Like what the founders did in the United States to create the United States was absolutely, it was just so revolutionary. Nobody had ever fought against the English and won until Americans did it. And then nobody actually did it again until I think it was in the 1900s, is when other communities started to break apart from the English empire. So,
and half of them still want to be English.
Yeah. I guess there's something about
which is also the same for a lot of Americans
anymore.
Which is also the same for a lot of Americans, because they're like, "Are you watching any of this royal stuff?" And I'm like, "We fought a war 200 and some years ago to not have to pay attention to these morons. They're inbred idiots. Why do I care?" So
yeah, people like their kings and queens. I don't like anybody telling me what to do, especially So anyway.
Except for your husband, right? Because you do
Oh no,
everything.
he doesn't. No, he doesn't get that privilege either. No, that is not how this works. And he went into the marriage knowing that, so
he brought that on himself.
He knows.
He
Yeah.
just wanted a medic in his corner. That's all it was. It was because he knew he was at some point going to come into the house and go, "Hey, look what I did," and you're going to be like, "Oh, we can stitch that."
Yeah, that's happened a few times actually.
I didn't even have to ask. I knew.
Yeah.
I knew. You know what's funny? While we were on talking, YouTube sent me a message saying, "Hey, you can stream again." So they'll as soon as I put this up, they'll be like, "You sound like you like liberty too much, and your guest certainly likes liberty. We can't have that." When's when will you take office?
Well, assuming that I win.
So, like I said, when will you take office?
I haven't asked that question yet. I've got to win first, and then I'll figure all those details out. So,
are you running at large, or are you running to represent a particular district or a particular ward?
In Bemidji, it's just there's 6 school board members, and every 3 years or every 2 years, 3 of those positions come up for votes. So it doesn't really matter where you live.
So it's not based on ward or neighborhood. It's all at large.
Nope.
Doing a lot of door knocking.
No, not a lot. I didn't actually find that to be very effective early on. So I have a Facebook page.
You're running for what? We have a school board? I'm like,
yeah,
huh?
That's most people. If they even answered their door, they were just like, so who cares? Like, well, thanks. Nice talking to you.
Get off my porch. I'm not giving you any money. I'm like, I don't want your money.
I did have a couple of people answer the door with their like nose and their face covered. And they're like, I can't, like they're still going through that disease of which we will not.
That shall forever go unnamed. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, yours is more entertaining, but mine is easier to say.
That's true.
Yep. Are you getting a lot of positive feedback from the community?
I am getting a lot of positive feedback, mostly because we have people that are just very sick of Republicans and Democrats. And so the people that are just, they were already kind of worn out from the 2-party system. And that they're just, this race in Bemidji has been very politicized. So we have a lot of people that they're only going to vote for you if you're a Republican, or they're only going to vote for you if you're a Democrat. But then there's this very large group of people that are just like, why does it matter for the school board which political party that you belong to? And I've been very clear from the beginning that I reject the idea that politics belong anywhere in the school system. I reject that that religion should have anything to do with the school system. I just, have been very clear, been trying to be anyways, about that school is only for learning and is for education, and that the quality is the focus, and that all of those other things don't even belong in a school. And there's a lot of people that want to hear that message, and they're very concerned that I would try to use the schools in a way that just is going to be one side of the political, the binary political system, or the other. And that's just not what I'm doing. So.
And I think this is Sarah says exactly, that's the biggest impact we can have, getting liberty-minded candidates on the school board, city council, and county commissioners, and et cetera. She's all right for I pick on her for being the only Hispanic libertarian I know in Minnesota besides her hubby, but she's the vocal one. He's the quiet one. Strange. I feel like we've had this conversation about somebody else.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
I really appreciate your time, and I really want to, stay in touch with you as far as how your campaign goes and how it ends up. And I'd really be interested in having you back on, after the election and after you take your seat, just to kind of hear your thoughts and feelings on what it becoming a public servant again, and how you're going to bring your what it looks like then once the reality of winning sets in, and and now all of a sudden you actually have responsibility. Um, but to bring your libertarian viewpoints and philosophy to bear on on governance, if you will, at a level that's really important. And I think that it says a lot about your character that the only thing that they could try and smear you with was CBD oil, which I guess being smeared in CBD oil is not really not that. I guess that's not that bad. Like, so they gave you a massage. I don't know, but I think that's the thing that they used to try and tear you down, and it just also says a lot about the mindset of the Minnesota GOP. That's how they handle things, because it's just commonplace across for the, like you said, they're sick of the Democrats and they're sick of the Republicans. And I commend you, my friend, for stepping up and taking action at the local level and not sitting around and waiting for somebody else to fix it. Says a lot about you, especially when you're raising and educating children and stitching up your husband. So,
Sometimes, yeah.
and I appreciate your family sacrificing time with you for a couple hours this evening so we could have this conversation. And I hope it's been mildly entertaining for you.
It has been fun. Thank you very much. I
Well,
appreciate it.
When the YouTube video is up, I will send it your way so we can send some people over there to watch it, because I would like subscribers. And so if you guys are watching and you do see this on YouTube, make sure you're subscribing down below, and that way you can know how things turn out for Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Do you have a website
I have a Facebook page. So Facebook
for the campaign?
Whiting for Bemidji.
Waiting for Bemidji.
Four is FOR.
I will try and get that in the video description.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have a good night.
Yep, you
I'm
too.
going to let you go, and I'm going to close.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you, Rebecca. We will be rooting you on from Owatonna. Prayers for you and your family's well-being, happiness, and prosperity in your endeavors. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. Like I said when I opened up the show, this is what we should be doing. You should be focusing on your local races. Get people trained up at the local level so that we can then train them up to go to the county level and then the state level, and then we'll see. We make a difference. We make a difference here. We make a difference, now in that respect. And at the most local of places, once we do that and we set up this mindset, like I brought up things like nullification and whatnot, we get people thinking about these things, that we can say no, that we don't have to do everything that they tell us to do. Then that's how things change. That's how things get better. That we avoid that as Tom Woods wrote in his most recent publication, National Divorce. We might be able to avoid national divorce if we can get back to small government, laissez-faire politicking, if you will. If we could just get back to that kind of mentality, get away from the professional politician class, and that starts by getting people involved at that really root level and going forward from there. School boards, city councils, sheriffs, county commissions, and so on and so forth. Want to thank all of my friends over at StreamYard. If you guys haven't found me on StreamYard, I am pretty easy to find. It's right down there. It's Minnesota Black Robe Regiment on StreamYard. I am on Twitter at Robe Regiment, Facebook TC Pearson, and Minnesota Black Robe Regiment on Facebook. If you're interested in any coffee or merchandise, you can email me at tcpearson@protonmail.com or message me here on Facebook. And I would be happy to get you prices and shipping going forward. And a big shout out to my friends over at the Arden Sales Group who have been great supporters of the show on the quiet side, and friends like Larry and Pirate Tomsky who have helped with things like equipment and encouragement and moral support. And I have a detractor out there who watched one of my videos and said, bro, don't drink while you're doing your show. And I don't think he means drink like alcohol, but he says it's annoying. Well, it's what I do, so I don't care. Anyway, we have got to take back our republic. The Minnesota DFL is running on this campaign of we have to save our democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a democracy. This is a republic. We are a constitutional republic. That's why we do what we do. And that's what we have to keep in mind no matter where we're at, no matter who we're voting for. We're here to save the republic and reclaim our republic if we can. Which is why, as I end every one of my shows, every one of my streams, every one of my videos, fight for your liberties, they're yours. Fight for your freedom, it belongs to you. And as always, Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are going for liftoff in T-30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at